Hey everybody, Tim Higgins. So we're going to continue our training. So I did a video a while back, I think it was yesterday, maybe day before yesterday, on how to create the RR pairs. Now in this video, we're going to put that to use. What we're going to do today is we're going to connect TDM with service virtualization, and we're going to push dynamic RR pairs into our service. So, and those RR pairs are going to be generated from TDM. Now you're going to see this in action, but more importantly is why. Well, think about it. If I have a production, did I close it already? If I have, no, let's say I have this API and this is production data. Well, we're going to add maybe a new feature, or we want to do some testing, right? Maybe some type of load testing, but we don't want to have to restand up an environment just to make that happen. And we can't do this one because this one has PII data. Notice the names and things like that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we want to recreate this one. Now, if you watched the other video, we have these RR pairs. Okay, so this is our request. This is the API we just talked about. And then we also have this one, and this has one record of data. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this one up. Nope, I'm sorry. Let's close this one. But what we want to do is we want to go into our service virtualization first. And this really doesn't matter, but it just makes sense if you do it this way. And what we're going to do is we want to create a new project. And we'll call it people RR, people from TDM. How's that? Perfect. So let's go ahead and select that one. Go ahead and close. We're going to hit refresh. Up here, we're going to go to that project. And the first thing we want to do is create a service. So let me close all this. We'll create a virtual service. Now I have videos out there on how to do this. If I don't cover in details how to do the recording and the WSDL or Swagger files, but let's do RR pairs. And we're going to call it people RR. It's not really important. It doesn't really need a description, but we'll have data from TDM. Now here, I'm going to put my files in there. And again, if you don't know how to do these files, go back and watch that other video. But it's pretty straightforward. I use one of these, and then I use other tools to give me the data. We're going to say continue. Okay, perfect. Now this is what I expect. Ironically, it's just what it's reading from the files. But this actually is what we're looking for. Notice we have no transactions yet. Did I miss anything up here? Nope, we're good. So now we're going to go ahead and go next. Let's see if I can get some real estate here, because I don't need that window right now. Next. So this wants to know what protocols. Again, I'm not going to get in this because we have videos on this out there. I do see my one rule, which is good because that's all I have. I do have one transaction, which is what I expect. That's my people. I only have one get method, basically. We're going to hit save and next. Here I'm going to allow duplicate specific transactions. And we're going to go ahead and save and deploy. Now here we'll give it a tag name. I'll use people. It's fine. I used it before. My think time is 100%. And I'm going to say next. Now what that's doing, let's go ahead and hit OK. We'll go down to our VSE. See if I can get to it just from here without. There we go. Perfect. I didn't want to open that little screen back up. Oh, I may have to. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So now we have it and it's running. Now this is running on port 1576. So if we grab this, we're just going to do a duplicate real quick, and we're going to change our port now to 15276. And perfect. So there is our mock. There's our virtual service running. We're no longer hitting our production API. We're now hitting our virtual service API. So now what we can do is generate some data for that. So let's go take care of that. We'll go into TDM. The first thing you want to do, let's create a project. And give it a second. We'll say new. We'll say people SV. Okay. This will create data for our people service. Okay. And then just hit save. Again, I don't have the best naming conventions. I'll say again because I say that in all my videos. So just bear with me on the naming convention. Now let's go ahead and hit close. And close. And refresh. And let's go find our people. I use the people quite a lot because it's just It's just a fictitious API that I create. Well, where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Now, what we want to do first is create a fake generator. Well, it won't really be fake, but it will just be a generator that we can use, but we're not going to do anything with it yet. So let's call it make people. Okay. When I say service, I mean our virtual service. Okay, so let's go ahead and save. And now what we want to do is go create an object. With our object, we're going to register a new object. We're going to select our RR pairs. Now, you can use anything here, giving another video, but right now we're using our RR pairs. Okay, and we'll call this, people underscore RR. And what we do is we want to upload our request file. So I'll click on this. This one's request. So we'll add that one. And now we want to add our response file. Now, these are the same files that we used in DevTest, okay? Or, DevTest Portal. I was trying to see. Service virtualization is what comes to my mind, not DevTest, but still, same thing. So here what we want to do, we have our object. Can I collapse this thing too? Just get some more real estate. No. Oh, yeah, I can here. Okay. So now I'm going to click on this. Now, here's a kicker. We're going to point to a person's database. Make sure you pick this, and you'll see why. If I go look at my SQL, I do have an empty database with no tables. Okay, that's the key, empty, right? So I have an empty database already set up inside my SQL. I already have a profile for that created, and we'll look at that in a few seconds. Now, excuse me. Now, this doesn't have to be this way. This is just cleaner for me, and you'll see why here shortly. Let me close that because it's stale data anyway. Now, with saying that, let's go double check because I forgot I didn't add that yet. And that's okay. We can always come back to this. So if I hit configuration, my profiles, I just have a profile to that people table, right? People database. I get in the habit of saying table because we use the term table a lot throughout TDM. But in this case, it's just a blank database. Now, the other thing you want to do is when you go down to DevTest Portal, this gets kind of tricky. It wants to know the protocol. Okay, in this case, HTTP or HTTPS. The server, in this case, I'm localhost. Obviously, it doesn't have to be localhost. In my case, it is. It's all running on the same server because this is just a demo. Now, the port is tricky. You want to connect to port 1505. The reason it's tricky is because if you look at the portal port, it's using 1507. Okay, it's not even using the same. You're going to want to use this one. This port, don't. Use 1505. And then, of course, your password and your password. Okay, let me just type it in just to be safe. And I'm going to say don't save just to be safe. But that's all you need for your connection, really, is just the server and the port, and then, of course, your admin and admin. And if it won't connect, it gives you an error message. So it just, that's to connect the two, it's really that simple. All right, so let's go back up here to our objects. Let's click on our object. Now, what we were saying is you got to change it to a person's table. You got to have a unique identifier, and you got to have a unique identifier here. It looks like I used one RR before, so I'll just use it again. Now, one thing that's important is notice this people RR 2980. The people RR is coming from the name. They just took out the underscore, and the 2980 is a unique identifier. You're going to see that in the database, so just leave it as is for now. If I'm using an existing database, I can put a prefix on front of my tables that allows me to recognize that these tables came from this deploy. Okay. Now it's already going to have this attached to it, so you may not have to do that, but you'll see once it's generated. And of course, there's a table suffix as well. You'll see that as well. So if I hit click and create or whatever it said, this is going to run a request. We'll give it a few minutes to run. But in the meantime, what it's doing is it's physically creating these tables. Okay, so we'll talk about it while it's running. Now, it created these tables in my database. Remember, my database was empty. If I look through here, now it's going to be kind of dangerous because I don't want to lock the tables while it's doing it. But this is my header information. Okay, I have these unique identifiers here. And if you notice the name, people RR underscore 2980. Okay, that's the name of my project plus that ID. the most important data that you're going to modify is really in the root. Now, all these other tables, like the query parameters is what you expect. These are really linking tables, okay? The header, I assume you'll never change that one, but I guess it's possible you could change the data there. But most importantly is you wouldn't want to change what you do want to change is in your root. So I have this shred ID. Now, shred is a term that we used with TDM in the older days. I haven't heard it so much, but what shred is doing is really just, it's taking the data and it's stripping it apart and putting it what it needs to, right? So like in the older days when we were creating XML files or creating JSON files, then we would say we're going to shred the data into a JSON or something like that. Now here, if you read my JSON, not the JSON file, I keep thinking JSON, but if you were to read our request and our response files, this is the response that was in our file. Okay, pretty cool, huh? Now let's go back, and I think we should be done. So let me hit refresh. Yes, it's complete now. So now let's go back up, and let's do something a little bit different. I'm going to click on this. Now I'm going to delete the data in the database. Okay, give it a second, and you'll see why in a few seconds. Okay, it said everything's good, but more importantly, if I pull the SQL over here, and if I go back to this header table, which had some data in it, it's now empty. Okay. Now, the good news is you don't have to delete these tables either. If I go and delete this object, it will delete the relation tables, the related tables with it. But what I want to do is I want to import some data. So you don't have to be the same RR pairs. We're going to give it a document ID as 1. We'll go from here to 2. These just have to be unique. It's really good for your logs, but on the UI, you really don't see it. So this is request should be first. And then my response. And I'm using the same files. You don't have to. Let's say if my response had more data, then I could use it. But what we want to do is we want to import it to our generator. Remember the generator that we created a few seconds ago or a few minutes ago? We want to import it into it. Now what it's doing, it's loading this data into the database. What I like to do, since running this import, the reason I like to clear this data out is just so because I don't have duplicates if it was to happen. I'm going to be honest with you, I never paid attention. I don't know if it deletes the data and then re-inputs the data. I don't want to take the chance of having dupes. Like I don't want 2 or 3 records here unless I create that. I just want the one. And that's why I like clearing out the data first. Now let's see where we are. Okay, now it's done. So now if I go over to my generators and we click on our generator, we now have our tables that was created. Now, sadly, this takes a few seconds, so bear with me. But we want to select on all these. And once I do this once, well, I was thinking I may pause the video, but you know what? I'll just talk. So, with saying that, all these, as you can see, they're being brought over here. We have this shred ID. Well, we don't want that. We want this to be TDM. Is there a cool word we can make up? TDMIs, maybe? We want it to be more TDM driven. So we don't want these to be hard coded, basically. But we still want them to be linked. Okay, that's very important because even though in the database we don't have a model, they're pretty much just flat tables. For TDM's purpose, we want a model because we may want to do more than what you're about to see me do. So I'll show you how to do that as well. Now, the good news is here we have an order. Maybe the order is important because these are unique identifiers. I'm not really sure. I've never thought about that. But we do have our rows. So for an example, our header has 7. Our response has 9. Our root only has 1 because that's the way I wanted it. And then this is our query strings, what are the query parameters? I call them query strings, but these are our parameters, and we have none, right? But let's say if I had, let me do this because I've got to do this in the talk again. So now that we have these, you can see it's the same data that we were looking at in our table. If I scroll down to root, here's the data that we were talking about. Now this is PII data, right? Not cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on a relationship. And we want to relate all these tables. Now pay attention to our shred IDs over here. We're going to say, okay, go. And that's going to go out. And right now it's validating where it's going to link it. And then you're going to approve it. That's what this is. And we're going to say, yes, we're good. Go ahead and do that. Now we're going to add these back. So that's the fun part. Now, when saying that, I totally forgot what I was going to say because I said we'll do this first and then go back to it. But now if you notice, we have it TDMIs, right? Can I patent that word, TDMIs? But it now looks like something TDM produced. If you don't know how this works, it's not a language. It's TDM subtext. And I kind of visualize it like ReSharper. I mean, not ReSharper. Oh my goodness, that's another tool, is JetBrains. But I kind of visualize it like regex, because you can really make this a complicated process query if you wanted to. And again, I don't like using the word query because it's not a bad database query, but I can say if this equals that, do this, right? So I guess it's a very complex syntax. There we go. Cool little tongue twister if you say it fast. Now we're adding these back, and then we're going to go get rid of that PII data. Because again, this is looking at production, because that's where our file came from. Again, I'm going to stress, if you do not know how to create those request response files, they are very simple to make. They are very important, but they're also easy to do wrong. So go watch the video and you'll see what I'm talking about. So here on the root, we want to get rid of this last name. So we'll click on the painter. And you've heard me say this a million times. I think the strongest point of TDM is this syntax language here. And this data painter is extremely powerful. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I like the thick client better. I just feel like I have more real estate, and there's some gotchas here. Like if you try to use keyboard shortcuts, it kind of hiccups on you. Here we're doing a last name. And we want 0 nulls. That's a double negative, right? No nulls. So here, I can't say Control C because then it laughs at me. But I'm going to use my mouse. That's a secret. Because they want you to use the tool, right? So I can copy over, I can cut it, blah, 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 blah. But to me, I'm just going to put it in here. Again, if you Control V, it's going to laugh at you. So we're going to use the mouse click that allows you to do it. And this is my first name. There we go. F-I-R-S-T. Yep. Okay, cool. Sorry, back in elementary, how do you spell first? So now we're done. Okay, as soon as I get finished. And that's all we did. So we got rid of our PII data, right? And I could go through here and do this to all of these, but this is just a demo, right? And the point is that in a real world, you wouldn't have just this little bit of data, right? You would have a whole list of records here, or columns, I guess. So now that we're done with that, once you've clicked off, it saved it if you didn't know that. So we're going to go back to our object. We're going to click on our people. Notice we're still running here, okay? Because we're about to use that. Now, I'm going to clear my data again. Again, you don't have to. I'm just a developer, picky guy, and to me, I just want to start with fresh data. Wow, that was fast. Okay, so let's go back to our objects. We've cleared our data, so I should have none in the database. Okay, and I don't. I just verified it. I just ran it, and I have none. Okay, so what I want to do is go over here, and I want to export. Now, on the export, I'm not giving a document ID. It sees there's no files. I'm not giving it a link ID, but we're going to publish, and we're going to publish 10. You know what? 10 takes a little bit. Let's just do 5. And it doesn't really take a little bit, but it takes a little bit when you have like white space when you're trying to show something, because then you got to talk while it's generated. We're going to update virtual service. It sees my VSE and it sees my running virtual service. See? That's pretty cool. That's a good sign that it's connected. I'm not going to change any of this stuff. I'm just an adult and I like to click on the word advance. If it said don't look, we'd all click on it, right? But I want to publish and export. And it's going to take a few seconds to get going. Now, once I click on this, this does what's called a group publishing, okay? So in my group job, the first thing it's going to do is going to push 5 synthetic generated bits of data to the database, to the tables. Then the next thing it's going to do is going to create our R pairs, and it's going to push it to service virtualization. So let's just hit refresh. Refresh. So it's running. The cool thing is while it's running, if I can do this without locking up, because you got to be careful not to do a deadlock, right? So we're going to close all of our documents, and we're going to just open up this one. And we've got 2. And that's why I said just do 5, right? Because it takes a bit to generate it. And again, it doesn't take forever. It's not that not that complicated. If you've ever seen data generation, it's about the same. Yeah, it's still running. Okay. So if I go back over here and hit refresh. So now we're at 4. We just got one more to go. And let's make sure I could count to 4. There we go, 5. I guess I didn't have to count that right there. Duh. But most important is notice we do not have production users. This is synthetic data that was created. So let's go back over here. The other thing it's doing is it's exporting to service virtualization. If you notice, we're refreshing over here. Okay, and that's the key that it's actually working. Okay, and then it reset our count too. That was pretty interesting. So let's go here and refresh. And we're done. So just like that, what we did, let's recap. So we have a virtual service that's pointing to our production API that replaces the production API. But we made our data be synthetically created from TDM. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Now, some of the things that I'm going to do next, but I can't do it because I've got to open up some firewalls. And unfortunately, it's New Year's Eve, so probably next week before I can do that. But the concept then is then you can push, your testing tool like BlazeMeter or whatever to this API and do some load testing and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what we expect. Anyway, so I hope this was helpful. And ping me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.